My name is Nancy Richards, and I'm the founder of Woman's Zone. And you guys, as if you didn't know, are Portia Mbao and Lumai Mira de Smit. Lovely. So lovely to have you both right here on my laptop. It's an absolute joy, and I'm only sorry I can't be with you in the wonderful Africa Cafe, which I love.
Yeah. Yes. Thank
you.
So
the reason that we're talking today is because at Woman's Zone, where we have a women's library, and every now and again we have story cafes at our headquarters at the Women's Library at Artscape. We, as you know, we're going to get together and we were going to have this wonderful Mother's Day celebration. There you are, mother and daughter. We were going to have lots of fun and tea and African nibbles, and it was all just going to be terrific.
Yes.
But sadly, we know what got in the way, so that's not happening. So here we are on the screen, which is almost just as good, because it's really nice to see you. So for those who don't know, and if you live in Cape Town and you're a foodie, how come you don't know about the Africa Cafe, and how come you don't know about the Africa Cookbook, which was published just last year? I think, was it November last year?
Yes.
There it is, back. Yes, Africa is still back to front, you can still see it. So the Africa Cookbook came about as it was the brainchild, if I'm not mistaken, of actually Lumai. However, the content is all about you, Portia. And the thing about the Africa Cookbook is that it's been born out of the Africa Cafe, and the Africa Cafe, wow. I mean, I want to say 27 years, because 27 seems like such a big, significant number in South African history, but it's now 28 years.
Yes.
Because Africa Cafe started in a tiny little house in a tiny little kitchen in Observatory, which I remember well. And then it grew into a bigger house, and then it grew into your wonderful place in Heritage Square. So Cape Town and the Africa Cafe is part of Cape Town's heritage, as is the Africa Cookbook going to be on everybody's libraries and on everybody's shelves and in everybody's kitchen. Certainly been in mine, I can tell you. So about the book is just filled with delicious Africa. There's some things that I can't pronounce, so I'm not going to try. But we've got Senegal. I did try, but I didn't dare risk it. Senegalese stuffed pawpaw, Zambian bean pies, Cameroonian brown nut stew, and of course South African cook sisters. Where would we be without them? So, and it also, let me add, it won a Gourmand World Cookbook Award winner. So congratulations, you guys. You must have been very thrilled. I think it's richly, it does indeed look beautiful, as well as you can almost smell it, which is just lovely. So, and I think one of the things about the Africa Cafe and the Africa Cookbook and African food, Portia, is that you say it's very much to do with identity.
Yes.
And as somebody who grew up with rice pudding and apple pie, I would appreciate that the African identity is very firmly rooted in food. Yes. But Lumai, I'm going to start with you, my lovely, because you're the birth mother of the book. You conceptualized it. And I know that you have a long history with food, because you were born around about the same time that the Africa Cafe was being born. So tell me, what was in your mind with the book?
So for me, the book was definitely, it started off at a place of, obviously there's all these incredible recipes, and we're always saying to people that my mom obviously has so many more amazing recipes than what we could possibly fit into one book. So this was really, we thought we got to start off with some of the most popular ones, some of the older ones that people have always been asking for. So it was about like putting these recipes into a book. But then for me, I realized that what I wanted to say with the book was so much more than just about, here's some tasty food. I felt that the Africa Cafe has always stood for like the sort of the Africa, the modern Africa, the Africa that people perhaps have a perception of what African food is, or what African style is, and the look and feel. And now in 2020, or it was 2019, I felt that there's been so much change, and it would be such a shame for people to think of African food or traditional food staying in this one type of, like an old-fashioned kind of way, you know. And I'm a very so I studied photography, and I love food photography. We all do, because it just looks amazing. And I always felt like African food was never like photographed to be looking as fancy, or as maybe as tasty or sophisticated as Italian, French, even Chinese or something like that. So for me, I suddenly realized that it was also important that this book said a lot for like Africa today, modern African women, what it means to cook African food in an African kitchen, which is, it can be light, it can be healthy, it can be fresh. It's not only stews, it's not only heavy sort of braais, it can be, you know, it can be healthy as well. It is healthy. I feel actually in a very much in its core and its essence, and traditionally it was a lot of vegetables and wild greens and stuffs and roots, potatoes and that, so it is healthy. So I felt that was important for this book to say all of that as best as possible. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you brought Africa into the 21st century as Africa actually is. So that, you know, as the continent has been evolving, so has the food been evolving. But unlike in other countries in Europe where they've sort of modernized and almost forgotten their history, you've kept your, dare I say, roots. You've maintained the roots at the same time as giving it a sort of an updated spin. Portia, this is what you've been doing since the get-go. I think that you've always, although you've had the you know, Cameroonian mud pies and the Ethiopian things that I can't pronounce, you've always given it your own spin. Consciously?
Yes, consciously, because I feel that they are our roots, but we always need to connect the roots to where we are now. We can't always go back. And I feel, and I still feel, a lot of South African cuisine has stayed in a particular genre. And then when we tried as a collective in South Africa to make it, bring it into the modern day, what we've done is we've actually then Frenchified it. So we take a little bit sweet potato and a little thingy, and then suddenly it looks like a beautiful creation on a plate, which is far removed from Africa, but we give it an African name, or we'll say batata, but it doesn't look African. So I didn't want to kind of, I didn't want to go into another genre that people kind of know, which is French, like most of our top chefs. I wanted to still keep the edgy Africanness in it. And so it was important in the portraying of it in photographs that it felt new and beautiful, but it still kept the roots. So in my cooking, I've always done the same. I've always put my own spin on it, my modern spin. Like at the moment in the restaurant we serve, well, not right now because of lockdown, but we serve what we call broccoli salad, where I kind of still use like Mozambican cashews to make like a cashew cheese instead of buying a mayonnaise. And it's a raw salad, which I make that all up, which is the dressing for it. So it's kind of has its kind of roots in Africa for me, the where the nuts come from, and my spin on. I love garlic and my spices and my herbs, but I always give it as a healthy spin. So I'm always pulling from the past, but bringing it into the present. So it's kind of an interesting mix at the restaurant. And you're right. I mean, after 28 years, we still have so many Cape Townians that haven't heard of the Africa Cafe. And some of them live right around the corner from where we are. And we've been there for so long. And they're like, oh, that building, is that where your restaurant is? Yeah, so.
How can they possibly miss it?
I know, it's such a big building. But people just don't see anything Africa. I mean, right now we're in lockdown, and we were thinking maybe we should open up the restaurant and do takeaways and anything, honestly, Nancy, anything African that's related to food, people avoid. They don't want to try and look, they don't want to experiment. And I don't know if it's just in Cape Town or all over, because I'm talking to the Cape Townian audience. And so often we'll have people from overseas will bring a Cape Townian to the restaurant and they'll go, my goodness, this food is delicious. We never knew, but there's still the legacy of African is not good. African means bad and dirty, and African means food I wouldn't identify, and I'm going to be eating insects and snails and innards, and yeah, I don't know. But I still continue doing it, and I'll continue doing it until I'm 98 or wherever.
Yeah. Well, you've grown your own legacy, and there she's sitting right beside you, so she could take over in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So many things about what you say. I mean, I just want to sort of focus a little bit on Cape Tonians. And one of the things you say in the book is that when people first came to the little Og's place, they said, oh, but this isn't restaurant food, this is home cooking. Yes. And in a way, that's kind of the point, because yes. It needs to be home cooking. So you need to achieve this balance of old and new and home and exotic at the same time. Yes. And my other favorite story about the Africa Cafe is that you famously turned away a crew from CNN who came yes. to take photographs at the cafe. And you said, sorry, we're too busy. We're full. We're busy with our customers.
Yeah.
Did they ever come back?
Yes, now they come back. They came back. They come back. But our customers are so important. We don't have any hierarchy. We treat everybody with the same respect, whether they are. We've had a lot of famous people in the restaurant, but to us they're just customers. They as when they sit there, we give them their privacy. We don't take fancy pictures for them to show who so and so has entered our restaurant. We give them the privacy, and they're there to enjoy a meal, and we totally respect that, and we treat every single customer exactly the same. And that's who we are. We're just simple people that love fantastic food. I'm not a trained chef, so I don't have a big name and a big aura around me. I'm like every other African woman throughout the continent, or let's say every woman around the world, who just does something she totally loves and dedicates her life to doing that.
You're very humble, Portia. You say I'm just like any other African women. I'm sure that there are a lot of African women out there wishing they could cook like you. But roots seems to be the word that's coming up again and again. Mm-hmm. Lumai, I want to know a little bit about your roots, because you were practically birthed in the kitchen where the Africa Cafe was birthed. So you grew up around food. Portia grew up, at her mother's knee, learning to cook. Were you conscious of food happening around you? What are your sort of root memory of food?
Yeah, so food is a big, like, I'm sure everyone will say it's a big part of their home life or their family. I think for me, it's interesting because my brother, who's 4.5 years younger than me, though I'm sure, because we always grew up with great food. I mean, our mom is an amazing chef, so we're used to that. But he grew up most of his life not bothered about food. Like at one stage, he kind of was living off protein shakes. He kind of went through that phase in his teens, and he thought like, I don't care, it wasn't a big deal for him. Whilst for me, food is everything. So I spend a lot of time in my day. I'm sure we're all right now in lockdown realize we spend a lot of time in our day preparing, eating. It's like, and then washing dishes. It's a big thing. So food for me it's always been really important, and more so when I think I also say in the book, when I was 9 years old, I discovered I had a dairy allergy. And I went to a homeopathic doctor who then also suggested there's a number of other things I should avoid. So then food became more of a conversation, more of a topic, because there was always like, I got to try alternative milks, alternative dairy products, or alternative, sort of dairy replacements. There was like avoiding wheat, avoiding sugar. So people at school, in middle school and high school, know me for like the broccoli eating girl. And steamed broccoli, when you open it up in your lunch, it smells like an armpit.
Don't have any friends anymore.
Yeah. So, but I was like, I would eat like broccoli and pineapple. My friends always tease me. I was, so health was also a big thing, and health in food, that was always like a big part of like my who I am really. So yeah. So, and I think like learning to cook and stuff, it just came like naturally. It was something, it was inevitable to learn to do. And I don't think I'll ever be as good as my mom, really. Like, it takes a lot of learning, a lot of practice and stuff, and I love it. But I feel some people, it's in their very bones, and hopefully I can learn as much as I can from her.
And you can take it into the 22nd century.
Yeah,
move it into the next century to that.
Yeah, I've got to keep the legacy, definitely. That's very important. Yeah.
Which brings me back to the health aspect. I think is very interesting. And you mentioned the sort of the healthy content, and we'll get onto ingredients and the health aspect and the sustainability aspect too of the ingredients. But in fact, I think that was where your career path in food started, Lumai. You were actually making healthy desserts. I think you were selling at the markets and so on. And that was going to be your entree, but then you switched tack. What was the turning point?
So, good question. I think in the process of having our catering company and also doing food markets, I loved the food I was making, and I was passionate about making something that like people could could eat. So something that didn't have dairy, didn't have refined sugar, didn't have wheat, and actually was tasty. Like that was, a big thing, because I've eaten so many healthy things which tasted like cardboard. And today you can find lovely health stuff, which is amazing, but kind of 10 years ago, that was a very different case. So for me, that was an amazing journey, but I found I was quite overwhelmed by sort of running my own business at, 22 or 23, and never having studied. So I kind of decided to take a break. It was kind of like a, like some sort of maybe you take a gap year or something like that, to just see, is there another facet to me and what I love to do? And I've always loved art. I applied to Michaelis. I wanted to do fine art, and people told me, no, there's no money in art anymore. Rather do something digital, photography, graphic design. So that's why I chose to go and study and kind of have a sort of college experience. Because when I left high school, I immediately started my own business. So that was I think I felt within me a need to sort of change track. And it was the right decision, yeah.
So food has become your art medium,
yes,
in a way.
Absolutely. It's like they come together. I never left it. Yeah.
And the Africa Cafe is your gallery.
Yeah.
So going back to the mothers and daughters theme, and it's interesting how Portia's passion evolved through you with your own particular spin. Portia, your mum, I think she was a very prolific cook, and I think she thought, and you were the only daughter, and she said, come on, now I'm going to teach you. But you were a willing recipient. Did she cook for a living? I seem to remember that there was a sort of diplomatic aspect.
She did do some cooking for a living, and but it wasn't a serious thing. It's just because she loved it. Excuse me. She loved cooking. She had a little kitchen garden where kind of she gave my job was to weed the garden. I remember that. So she this is where you start. Weed between the carrots and between the cabbages. That's what I had to pull out the weeds. That's how she got me involved in the kitchen gardening, because with the health aspect, it started off from being interested in where the food came from and the herbs, because I've got fortunately a big garden here, and I have a lot of my own herbs and some of my own vegetables, which I then dry and use those in the restaurant for all my spice mixes. So that's where the training started off, more or less, from being interested in where the food came from, the gardening, then got me interested in the organic food and food that I could buy. I made sure it was organic. At the restaurant at the moment, we use our organic olive oil, organic vegetables. Whatever we do is usually organic. Our meat, our chicken, and our lamb. Our lamb comes all the way from Peru. So all our ingredients tend to be quite expensive because I'm so pedantic, absolutely pedantic about using organic stuff. And I don't use packets of soups and packets of stock, or I make my own. If I'm going to use ketchup, if a recipe calls for ketchup, I'm going to find out how to make ketchup from scratch, which now I know I make my own ketchup, tomato sauce, or tomato paste. So everything I make from the ground up. And I think that's where my interest started, was really from my mother making me weed the garden and spending at least a half an hour. And this was when I was like 6 and 7. Most kids are sitting in front of the computer or in front of digital something to entertain them during holidays. I was told, this is a row of carrots, that's where you're going to weed. And then from there, I saw how she cooked, what she did, and that's how it got me interested. And usually we were cooking for maybe some function. She threw a lot of cocktail parties, and and in her entertaining, and I saw how she entertained, and I loved it. And I loved the way I saw the journey the food made from the garden into the kitchen, and people enjoying it. And then I also realized when I bought some other fruit and vegetables, it wasn't from the garden or from a place you knew of organic, it didn't taste the same. So I'd make the same recipe, but it didn't taste the same. So that's what made me think, that's where it is. Start with an authentic ingredient in its own flavor and then move forward. So yeah. I'm not sure if I answered your question there, but
oh no, you did, but you gave me more, which is wonderful. I'm just thinking that in your mum's day, probably organic wasn't really a word that people use other than sort of chemically. So she wouldn't have been conscious of that. But I love the way you drop in the cocktail parties, which gives us a sense of your mother as an African woman being quite a sophisticated African woman. And as a family, you'd moved from Swaziland, Mozambique, Joburg. So there was a distinct Pan-Africanness. Was she very conscious about cooking from other than just South African food, cooking dishes from elsewhere in Africa?
I'm not too sure. I think in a way she was, but like me, she was also creative. As women shared, if she cooked a beautiful chicken dish, and then she'd have somebody there from Zambia or from Mozambique at the cocktail function, and the women always share and say, oh, this tastes like a chicken we have in our country, and this is how we do it. And I think subconsciously or consciously, she's like, oh, can I have the recipe? Or what do you do? And she'd most probably the next day or the next time she had to prepare the chicken, try it that way. Or so I'm not sure if it was conscious or unconscious, but I know with me, excuse me, got a frog in my throat. It was very much conscious to include the whole of Africa. I could have easily made a South African cookbook. But I just feel as South Africans, we were cut off from the rest of Africa for so many years. And then we have xenophobia when we have a whole lot of other Africans trying to come to South Africa and trying to be part of us. Kosher, yes. That I wanted to include the whole of Africa and even parts of Africa that don't consider them as Black Africa. As far as I was concerned, if they were on this continent, they were Africans. So I did that. I traveled and I consciously brought all those flavors. And if I couldn't travel, I asked a friend who had been there, oh, you went to Zanzibar. Tell me, what do they cook there? What do they eat? Where do they get their food from? Do they fish a lot, or do they grow a lot of vegetables? Do they eat cassava? So that's where I'm always interested in Africa, and I still am. And I was hoping to travel to Rwanda this year, but we don't know, we'll see.
Well, it's a treat still to come. I believe it's very beautiful, yes, tiny as it is, and very green and very healthy. So it'd be interesting to see what comes out of that. Mm-hmm. But a bit like Lumai, you also changed tack, because had things been very different, you went off to America and you were going to study, was it fashion first and then pharmacy? But anyway, both fashion and the pharmacy fell by the wayside. Because when you came back to South Africa, you couldn't, it was fashion that came later. You couldn't get a job in fashion, which is really where the food started.
Yes.
Is that how it happened?
That's how it happened. That's how I just thought, let me do something that comes naturally. And that's how it started. And I remember, that's why we are called the Africa Cafe, because when we started, we really thought we were just going to be a tiny cafe selling muffins and scones and sandwiches, really. And but then more and more, I thought, when I found my mom's recipe book, I thought, oh, wow, look at all these recipes. Let me try them. Like macadamia nut chicken, I don't know if you remember, because you did our first review back then in 1992, like macadamia nut chicken. And I thought, let me try this. Let's see what that happens. So, and that's how it actually evolved. And I found that I so enjoyed cooking for people, and people enjoyed eating. There's like a lovely relationship in cooking food for people, and then they enjoy it and they kind of feel appreciative for what I've done. So that's where my love actually, I wouldn't say it started, but it continued on from there. And there were hidden parts within me that I didn't know were there. And the more I cooked, the more I discovered, oh my goodness, I love doing this. I love mixing my own spices. Yeah, so that's how it actually then kind of evolved.
So you are organic. Your cooking is organic.
Yes, it is.
Literally.
Yes.
We've been talking for all this time. We haven't once looked at a recipe. And I'm just thinking of the, this cocktail party thing popped into my head. And I found the pâté africain, which is, I'm sure you've got it sort of roughly in your head, but can you give us a rough idea of what that is? It's a beautiful shot, by the way. Lumai, just a quick segue. How long did it take you? Let's do one question at a time. tell me about the pate Africain, then we'll talk about the photographs.
The pate Africain is it's a fish dip. You steam the fish. Yeah, it's fish and potato with onion that you steam together with like a pepper and some salt and some herbs, and that gets all ground together, mixed together. I mean, it's very smooth because I put it in a blender, but if you don't have a blender, you can just use a masher to get it as nicely together and bound together. And with a little bit of lemon juice. It's very simple. With a little bit of lemon juice, it's a delicious, delicious dip, which you don't find around a lot, like a fish dip, except for, what was it? There is a Middle Eastern dip that has got fish in it anyway. But so that's the whole thing. And then that you can use it as a spread or just as a dip at cocktail functions or on little crudités or any way you want to use it. Yeah. So you photograph.
I can see you just get completely carried away. Once you start talking about it, I can hear it coming out. I do want to get onto the photographs, but because they are really very beautiful. But I just want to talk a little bit about travel, which is something you've done separately and together. Portia, I know you and Jason traveled a lot. I mean, Africa has been sort of calling you. But Lumai, for you, I think the folks took you to different African countries. What was your, I mean, as a sort of kid brought up in South Africa, how did it feel checking out other countries in Africa?
It was quite an adventure because one of the most memorable trips, and it's got to be probably one of the sort of the most adventurous ones we've ever been on, was one of our first ones. I think I was around about 12, maybe a bit younger, when we went to Mali and Senegal. And that's definitely a part of Africa that to this day I say to people, I've been to Mali and Senegal, and people have been to Egypt, Morocco, but few people I know have been there. And I don't know what it's like today, but then like tourism was low to non-existent. We would stay in hotels where there was like no one else would arrive. They'd switch lights on for us. There was like dust everywhere. It was like a very, very interesting African experience with all the sort of rough, wild kind of edges that you can imagine. And for me, I think as a young girl, I kind of just, I just took it in. And there's a part of you just kind of like, okay, like you find it exciting more than having an expectation that you're going to have maybe some sort of cozy Club Med holiday, and then you're shocked to find yourself in the middle of like the Niger River, but like on a boat. But I just took it in, and since then of having these sort of really crazy experiences where there's like drop toilets and all that kind of stuff, I've loved that kind of travel. I mean, we've traveled a lot, the most in recent times, to India, which is kind of a similar energy in a way to Africa, being very like, it can be very raw, and the spice and the smells are very intense, and there's that kind of travel excites me. So I've come to really love that, and I'm really grateful my parents took me to those unusual places when I was young. I think it's really important.
Yeah, Mali and Senegal already, you can sort of, you get the vibe. It's just so exciting. I just want to come back to the Africa identity thing, Portia, because when you've traveled, you've obviously had your little notebook and you've had your foodie antennae flapping and picking up all sorts of things. But Lumai mentioning India there, and about Indian food and babies eating curry when they're very tiny, and how that sort of shapes their identity. Just expand on the African identity food connection.
For me, is the food connection has a lot to do with finding out what other Africans. First of all, there's an illusion, it's an erroneous illusion that Africans eat a lot of meat. So we eat a lot of vegetables, and in particular green leafy vegetables. Before fast foods in countries in Africa where we don't find a proliferation of fast food chains, you see how healthy people look, the way they walk, the way they talk. It goes with a lot of pride in the way they prepare their food. They don't use a lot of oils, and they don't eat a lot of packets of chips and white bread and etc. They seem to eat meals that are packed with nutrients, minerals, and vitamins, and they eat less because their body is not always craving for stuff. So it's, for me, that connection is important for us to remember, because that can get lost, especially in South Africa, where we eat a lot of white mealie meal, and we think maize meal is part of our staple. Well, that's African. It's not African at all. People just do the history that maize was brought here by the Portuguese travelers passing South America, and the exchange, and they found that it grew much better here, and labor was cheaper here, and that's, so there are lots of different exchanges. So to find the true the essence of how we eat in Africa, we eat a lot of wild greens, leafy vegetables, and roots. When we went just recently, last year when we were in Nairobi, even then I still get shocked at the arrangement of different leaves and greens, and a lot that I can't identify. And I find out, how is this eaten? And luckily they speak English there. You can speak to most people, they speak English. And they'll tell you, no, you get this in, this comes from this village, this comes from the north, this comes from the south. They're all green, and then we chop them, and this is how we do it. And it's all in the same way as spinach. We eat spinach or imifino or morojo. It's similar, but we just do a lot more of the pap and the mealie meal and the meat. And people, our animals were kept as our sense of exchange. That was our monetary. We kind of like cows. You took the cow to market, and from there you kind of got your vegetables in exchange of it. We didn't all just keep slaughtering meat every day and think that that wasn't our food. So people are like, oh, Africans like braai, they like a lot of meat. No, pap and meat, that's totally not the way we, that's a recent thing. That's not part of the history. And so that's always, so I always try to bring back, in fact, I feel I need to bring out an African vegetarian book, because there's so many vegetarian dishes and recipes from Africa, lots more than there are a whole lot of meat dishes. Yes, recently we love meat. Everybody likes the taste of meat on fire, etc. But that's not what we, so for me, that heritage, it's important to remember the roots. The roots we kept, because in winter there were not as many greens, but we ate lots of roots, tubers, etc. And then the leafy vegetables in the rainy seasons, everybody had. And then also another thing we did in Africa, the leafy green vegetables, we actually dried those and used those in a powdered form in winter. So, so that for me it's important to remember that whole, bring that back and make people aware of it, because people are definitely not aware of it. I've tried, and I've now assumed people do know, but I come across a lot of people who are like, oh, really? And yeah, so.
Gosh, I hope you made a note of that, Luma. It sounds like you've got another cookbook coming up, vegetarian African cookbook.
We have a few. We have lots of ideas. Yeah.
I bet. And it sounds like a great opportunity, because here in South Africa, I mean, right now, the food situation is dire. People are desperate for any food, never mind health, anything at all will do. So it's a very desperate situation, but generally speaking, in South Africa, our health has got a lot to be desired, simply because of the fast food influx and all those things. So there's lots and lots for you to do. And it also sounds like you should actually turn your hand to agriculture, because all those green leafy vegetables, while we're busy monocropping white maize and all sorts of other things that are okay, but we could be doing better. So there's a lot for you to be doing, Portia. So you might become a farmer, and I think that would be a very different kettle of fish. But I just want to come back to the book and the photography, Lumai, because you, photography, it's a huge thing. And I think there's a myth about food photography that it all has to be sort of sprayed with this and that. But actually, I think that's not the case anymore. It's much more natural. So did you literally, was your mum standing there taking things off the stove and you were putting it, talk us through the photography experience?
Yes, literally, it is like that. So all the pictures were taken like in and around our home, in our kitchen and stuff. I would set up little sort of studios around the place, but all of it is like natural light. And then I have been for a while kind of building up a collection of props. which is also fun, and I add to that during the shooting of the book. But we learned a lot. I mean, I've always, as I said, I've always loved food photography, and I've done some food photography, mostly for like social media and fun things like that. So when it came to doing the book, I was quite confident. But as I've told the story before, when we got through about maybe halfway of shooting about 30 of the pictures of the recipes, we realized that the later pictures were looking really good, and the first ones were not that great. And we thought, oh, I think we need to go back and reshoot these. So in that process, we learned that sometimes the food can't be cooked to like completion. I'd say maybe just leave the chicken pieces separate to the gravy, and then during the food styling, I'll pour the sauce, so it, you know. So I learned some of the finesse of food styling, and I kind of, yeah, that was a fun process, and so but it was literally like, there was the stove, there was the, you know, this picture was taken, it was like that.
Yeah.
Sorry
and
add here as well.
And
with Luma, with the photography, we also kind of in one shoot, there were of one recipe, there was something like 200, 300 different views or photographs that we took. So when we went through the process of actually choosing the right picture for the book, that took, the editing took a lot of time, like this pictures like that, because each dish had so many different angles and
for each recipe I would take like about 200 pictures. So there was
pictures.
The editing of the pictures, and we'd have to sit together and agree, and
so that was also a process that just took, I think that actually took longer than actually taking the pictures, because how do you decide 200 pictures and you want to kind of show this dish the best way and represent it and make people feel they want to kind of just lap it up, and you look through 200 pictures and you go, that one, this one, this one. So it was quite
we became perfectionists as well. Like, there's some recipes we shot 3 times.
Yeah.
Like on 3 separate days. Yeah.
Yeah. I just kept on having to make it, and of course we'll look through the 200 pictures and we find that we're still not satisfied. So I'll redo the dish the next day and we restart again. We did a lot of that. Yeah.
You two are a pair of perfectionists, I'm afraid. Yes, and lots of Danya. I read Danya is your thing, so it appears here, there, and everywhere, which is just lovely.
Yes.
It makes me think now, so there was all this cooking going on, all this shooting going on with light and props and all the bits of Danya. Who was doing the eating? Is this where your brother came in? Did he get to, who got to do the sampling?
Well, we have, we ate, and we also had, we had the lady that helps my housekeeper. I used to give her a lot of stuff. She took a lot of stuff home. She was always happy every day to like, oh, and we're shooting today. Oh, great. Because she knew there's all this food to say, take the bread, take this gravy, take the chicken, take this. Yeah, because it was just way too much. We couldn't put on as much weight. Look at, I have put on lots of weight now in lockdown, more than I did when we were shooting. I think the shooting kept us busy because we were actually working. Now we're just sitting and eating. I'm still experimenting with recipes.
I think you've earned it. I think it sounds like you've been very busy. And I was going to say, how come the two of you are not the size of houses? Because when you're surrounded by food all the time, you know, we'll just take a little bit of that and we'll try a little bit of that. But you both look very elegant. Which brings me to lockdown. 2 things. It brings me to, I think that part of the proceeds or percentage of the proceeds from the book are going to an organization called Future Me.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about it, either one of you.
Yes, yeah. So I work part-time for Future Me. I started there as it was an internship when I graduated from graphic design, and they're amazing business company, and what they do is they fill in this interesting gap in between like high schoolers, like youth, but still in high school and learning about the world of work, and particularly a lot of like what we need in South Africa is like vocational jobs, which are like trades and that kind of stuff, which kids in high school are thinking, okay, I'm going to go study to be like a lawyer, doctor, nurse, teacher, those sort of professions. But there's so many other jobs which are, and these corporates are desperate to find people, and mostly they're looking for people who like fit their company culture, people who are happy to learn on the job. Not necessarily people who have to be qualified beforehand. So they're looking for young talent, but the kids in school don't know that. They don't know about them. So we work a lot with SPA, and we run, and so what Future Me does is they run programs where the kids can go almost like a type of a job shadow. They can go spend the day there. They can go learn from the people in managerial roles and the directors of SPA, who teach them about like what it's like to kind of journey through from school into your career in non-traditional kind of ways. It doesn't mean they have to go work in SPA, of course. They can go work in just different jobs, but very much jobs which are needed in South Africa. So yeah, so that's what Future Me is works in that
but
space.
also you forgot also to mention that they also have an app where you are involved in your graphic design and etc. Apps where it kind of keeps them, like right now you're running different programs to keep the students involved and still excited about what the jobs are, how to write CVs, how to get
like a lot of work readiness.
Work readiness. They do a lot of work readiness, and also the exposure. You have a big function which you had at
it's like a career. We call it the World of Work event, and it's like a career fair, but like on steroids. We say it's super fun, it's super engaging. It's kind of like it's like a fair more than, and it's not really like universities or colleges coming to sell themselves to the high schoolers. It's more actual
different jobs,
different businesses who come and say, this is what you could do here, this is what you could do in electrical, this is what you could do if you're doing plastering or bricklaying, or there's all these different spaces you can move into. Plumbing, which is like people are desperate for more plumbers. So yeah.
So and then when Luma left school, she was very confused.
Well, that sounds very.
Pardon? And so when Luma left,
no, carry on.
When Luma left school, she had.
No, carry on. It went for a little bit.
Yes, it keeps coming and going. When Luma left school, and both Leo, my son as well, there's a confusion. No matter what top schools you go to, there's confusion because of vocational training and career kind of awareness in schools. The teachers that are there, and the head of the guidance, like what was Ms. Viata?
Like a career guidance.
The career guidance. They are not out in the field and they don't really know what's happening. So they are not there to kind of guide in different avenues of students. So a lot of students are confused. They feel all they need to do is go to college. They think that's all that's left to do. I'll go to this university because those universities come onto school to come do recruiting, or that's what they were. But there are all these other jobs that filter that they can do. And so that's what Future Me does. But at this stage, there's nobody that's really giving them money to do what they are doing, putting up all these events, running all these apps, and taking the students, because there's like buses and kumbis they have to hire to take kids from different schools and take them to SPA or take them to different industries to show them this is what you can do. So that needs some kind of financial help. And that's why I thought, wow, if somebody was doing that for my kids when they left school, that would have really been helpful. And that's why we thought, wow, this is what I want to kind of give some money, because it's a kind of like a small little industry or company that's doing something there that's kind of helping with job creation and making people aware, instead of kids thinking, I can't go to university, but I don't know what to do. I must become a cashier at Pick and Pay, and that's all that's there for me to do, without knowing that there's so much that's available. The companies, there needs to be somebody that ties the two together, and that's what Future Me does.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with being a cashier at Pick and Pay.
No, nothing wrong. But Pick and Pay has got a lot of cashiers.
They have, that's true. But I think the universe is beginning to tell us that we're running out of time because the internet keeps going. But a couple of things I just wanted to ask you. you know, I mean, we've already got you being a farmer, and we've already got you making another cookbook, but it feels like there should be some sort of educational aspect. I mean, I'm sure you have lots of people knocking on the door of the Africa Cafe saying, can I come and work? Can I train? Have you considered, the two of you, somehow combining Future Me and Africa Cafe into some sort of cooking, even online, cooking school somehow?
Yeah, well, I think we haven't had like really time to do it until now, where a lot of people have been saying to us, you must do like, you know, Zoom cooking classes or something like that. So we've been thinking a lot about that.
Yes, we actually have to.
But before this year we had a pack of things we planned to do. I mean, seeing you and the book club was one of them. So we couldn't imagine of having time for that. But now with this online digital space that's opening up for everyone, it's definitely very, something interesting.
Yeah. Which brings me to the final thing. I mean, what have you learned in lockdown, aside from having the opportunity to share and incubate ideas and be together and eat? What one sort of takeaway factor, perhaps around food, because it is such a huge issue for the whole country. Any thoughts?
Around food, I don't know. I don't know if it's something that I didn't know before. I think my experience around food during lockdown has very much been around, because I think, like, as who we are, and you've heard, we're very passionate about health and authenticity of everything. And I think what this whole experience really brought up was around, you know, raising your immune system and health, right? There's a virus. What can you do about it apart from social distancing? What can you do about it? And it's about taking care of your body. So I think for us, we've done a lot of like actually eating very simply, like making vegetable soups and broths and stuff that, and we make green juice every morning. We've always done that. So I think for me, it's about sometimes simplifying, because we have like a Sunday sort of roast where we do like a big old thing and all that, but on the day-to-day, simplifying to eat really healthy, which does not have to be expensive, because I know obviously that's a big issue for people, is to kind of, I think it's worrying if in this time that we're trying to be healthy and stay well, that if people are just eating the cheapest food possible, or if they're not taking into account that you must also be eating healthily. That's a big part of what we're trying. You can't just be socially distant. I think you must also be healthy. So for me, that's an important thing around.
It's a huge topic. But just finally, in closing, Portia, I'm assuming the Africa Cafe is closed for now. How are things looking? Will it open up soon? What's the story?
Well, I think right now we are thinking of perhaps December for us, because it has to do with other countries opening up their borders and passengers and flights being able to, you know, where we can get, because it was going to be a lovely year for us as business-wise, but a lot of our customers canceled, and obviously they couldn't travel even if they wanted to come. So we hope that December time, people will be able to come, feel they want to explore again, come to Africa, come to South Africa, come and enjoy the sun here, because it will be cold there. And just, so that's what we're thinking. We've told all our employees that they must be home, take care of themselves, be with their children right now, because we're looking at perhaps December, January, when our borders are open and theirs is open as well. And obviously by that time, hopefully we've set up the restaurant to be ready for COVID-19, for people who, you know, safety measures. And also for me, as far as food is concerned, I'm also thinking of, as Lumai mentioned, food that will help and support people's immune system, whether they know it or not. That's where I feel authentically in my heart, I want to actually, a gift I want to give. I don't just want to go back and serve the food that I did. I want to make sure that the ingredients I use, they've got the appropriate minerals, vitamins, and that can support people's immune system. Yep.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay, something funny has happened to my speaker. Definitely the universe is telling us it's time to go and put the kettle on. But I just want to say once again, you know, this is the most wonderful book. And thank you very much. I think you've done a wonderful collective job. And I really look forward to getting together, having the Cameroonian mud pies or whatever we're going to have, and lots of tea, and talk again in person. It's been wonderful. And lastly, aside from the beautiful food and the beautiful photographs, it's the most beautiful layout. And Quivertree, your publishers, have done you proud. Very last question, is it available as an ebook?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet.
It's meant to be an ebook on Take-A-Lot. I'm not sure if it's available there yet.
It's meant to.
Quivertree has put it up for that. Yeah,
okay. I was going to say what we do know is that the bookshops are now open,
yes.
So people can order it from their bookshops.
Yes.
And voila, yeah. Lovely.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Portia Lumai, bless you. It's lovely. I'm sorry we couldn't meet at Woman's Zone. Next time we'll meet at Woman's Zone, and you can find us womanzonect.co.com. You can check us out there, and the Africa Cafe, you only have to type in Africa Cafe, Cape Town, and it will come up like a dream. Bless you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy.
Look after yourselves. Yeah. We'll speak again.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.